I never thought my own family would plot against me. At first, it was just late-night calls, my mother crying, saying, "Your sister is pregnant, she needs her own place." I believed her because that's what I was raised to do, sacrifice. But then, on my birthday, I stumbled upon a group chat. My parents and sister were already planning to sell my country house, my house, without even asking me. Imagine realizing the people you trusted most are silently stripping away your future. That's when I stopped being their victim and started planning my revenge. I grew up believing that love meant sacrifice. From the time I was a child, my mother whispered into my ear, "Your sister will always need more than you. She's fragile. You must protect her." I was the sturdy one, the dependable one, the one who didn't need much. That was the story etched into me, and by the time I turned 35, it was no longer a story. It was a law I lived by. Every decision I made, every dollar I saved, every night I stayed awake working overtime, it was all in service of family. I convinced myself it was love. Even in adulthood, when I bought my country house with my own money, I thought of it as our house, a place where everyone could gather, where we could all breathe. My parents visited often, and my sister used it as a weekend getaway. They didn't thank me, but I told myself gratitude wasn't the point. Love was, family was. But love, when demanded, rather than shared, becomes a chain. I didn't recognize that yet. I told myself I was lucky, that having a family to care for was better than loneliness. When my mother called me late at night, sobbing about bills or emergencies, I wired money instantly. My father would say, "Your sister can't work right now. You know how hard it is for her." And I would send more. I felt guilty if I even paused before helping. One night, around 2 in the morning, the phone rang again. My mother's voice was sharp from tears. "Claire, please, your sister is pregnant now. She needs her own place. You're her only hope." I sat in my country house, alone, staring at the beams of the ceiling, while her words drilled into me. I thought of my sister's face, pale and tired, and the child she carried. Of course I had to give. That's what family meant, didn't it? But beneath my obedience, there was a faint tug, an unease. I had been here before, many times. There had been other emergencies, other needs. Every time I bent, every time I gave, I never asked what it cost me. I never asked why it was always me. The truth is, I had ignored the signs. There had been so many. It started with the little requests, $50 here, $100 there. Always urgent, always desperate. Then came the late-night calls, demands framed as pleas. "If you loved us, you'd help." My father's casual comparisons sliced at me like paper cuts. "Your sister doesn't have what you have. She deserves more." Each time I swallowed the pain. I told myself, it doesn't matter. I can handle it. I'm stronger. But the signs grew louder. There was the time my sister borrowed my car for a week and returned it with an empty tank and a dent she never mentioned. There was the night my parents invited friends to their country house, posting photos online as if they owned it. And there were the silences too, the way no one ever asked me how I was doing, the way my achievements dissolved into the background while my sister's smallest victory was celebrated like a coronation. Still, I held on, because I thought if I let go, if I admitted they were using me, I would lose everything. Family was all I had. There was one night I remember vividly. I had just come home from a long shift at work, exhausted, aching. My phone buzzed, another request for money. This time, I stared at the message, my hands trembling. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, poured myself tea, and sat at the window. For a fleeting moment, I let myself imagine a life without those demands, without the constant weight of obligation. I smiled, just a little. The night was quiet, and for once I felt free. But the illusion broke quickly. The phone rang again, buzzing and buzzing until I picked up. My mother's voice was sharp. "Why didn't you answer? Don't you care about your sister?" The guilt surged back like a tidal wave, drowning the fragile peace I had just tasted. I apologized. I promised to send the money. That was the rhythm of my life. A brief pause, a glimpse of freedom, crushed beneath another demand. And yet, even as I ignored those red flags, the truth was already circling me, waiting for the right moment to strike. Because the betrayal wasn't coming in whispers or small requests anymore. It was gathering in secret places, hidden group chats, quiet conversations, plans that did not include me. And I had no idea that on my birthday, the day I expected love and celebration, I would uncover the cruelest truth of all. On the morning of my 36th birthday, I woke up expecting nothing extraordinary. I had planned a quiet evening alone, maybe a slice of cake from the bakery in town, maybe a walk through the garden of my country house. I had stopped expecting celebrations from my family years ago, but a small part of me still wished they would remember. I checked my phone, no calls, no texts, just silence. Then a notification blinked at the top of my screen, a message that wasn't meant for me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. My hands moved without thinking, and suddenly I was staring at a group chat I hadn't been invited to. The names were familiar: my mother, my father, my sister. They had made a private circle, one where my name didn't belong. I scrolled. Line after line cut into me like glass. "We need to finalize the deal soon. The realtor said the market is hot. Claire will understand. She always does. Don't tell her until it's too late. She'll get emotional." And then my sister's words. "That house should be mine anyway. She doesn't even have kids. I deserve it more." My throat tightened. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the phone. I read and reread the messages, hoping I had misunderstood, that it was all some twisted joke. But the more I read, the clearer it became. They were planning to sell my country house, the only thing I had built for myself, without telling me. They had already scheduled a meeting with a realtor. They had decided everything. My birthday wasn't just forgotten. It had been chosen as the day to finalize my erasure. The room spun. My chest heaved with anger and grief. I pressed my palm to my mouth to keep from screaming. For years I had sacrificed, convinced myself that love meant giving, and now this was my reward. Betrayal dressed as practicality. I wanted to confront them immediately, to call and scream and demand answers. But another part of me, a colder and quieter part, whispered, "If they could do this in secret once, they'll do it again. If you explode now, they'll deny it. They'll twist it. They'll make you the problem." I set the phone down, my body trembling. It felt as though the ground had opened beneath me. I thought I had lost everything. But that night, in the wreckage of my birthday, a thought began to form. What if I stopped being their victim? What if I turned this betrayal into a weapon? I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the game changed. I began by pretending. When my mother called the next day, her voice syrupy with false concern, I kept mine steady. Of course, Mom, if you think selling the house is best for the family, I'll consider it. The lie slid easily from my tongue, though my stomach churned. She sighed with relief, convinced I was as gullible as ever. Behind the mask, I moved differently. I backed up my files, stored important documents in hidden drives, and enabled recordings on my phone during every call. I retrieved old contracts from my iCloud, piecing together a timeline of ownership that left no room for dispute. I even installed a small app that could log every message exchanged with my parents, preserving evidence of manipulation. But at night, when the house was quiet, the facade cracked. I curled up on my bed, clutching the phone to my chest, tears soaking the pillow. I just wanted to be loved, I whispered into the dark. My voice sounded small, almost childish. All I had ever wanted was to feel chosen, valued, worthy of the family I had given everything to. That wish seemed foolish now, but it still ached in me like a broken bone. In those moments of weakness, I could almost hear their voices. "You're selfish, Claire. You don't understand family." And for a flicker of time, I believed them. But then the anger returned, hot and sharp. Their betrayal had stolen my trust, but it had also given me clarity. I saw them now not as sacred figures, but as schemers who believed I would never fight back. They had mistaken my kindness for stupidity. That was their mistake, and so I began to craft a plan. Slowly, carefully, I mapped out every move. I would stay silent until the right moment. I would gather proof they couldn't deny. I would make sure that when the truth came out, it would not only shatter their schemes, but expose them in front of everyone they sought to impress. They had chosen to play this game in the shadows. I would bring it into the light. I wiped my tears, sat upright, and opened my laptop. The first file I pulled up was the deed to the country house. As I stared at my name printed clearly across it, my chest steadied. This wasn't just a house, it was my stand. And for the first time, instead of bending, I felt myself harden. They thought I would lose everything. But what they didn't know was that I was already turning their betrayal into my strategy. The night I chose to stop being their victim, everything about the way I lived shifted. I became a quiet observer in my own family, collecting pieces of their words and actions like puzzle fragments. Every call, every message, every casual request became evidence. I started with the financial trail. I dug through bank statements, tracing withdrawals and unexplained transfers that aligned suspiciously with my parents' sudden shopping sprees. There were thousands of dollars unaccounted for, amounts that could only have come from the loans they pressured me into giving. I created folders, spreadsheets, and timelines, each detail carefully documented. Then came the recordings. I downloaded an app that automatically recorded every phone call. Whenever my mother cried into the receiver, guilt-tripping me into sending more money, I had it captured in her own words. "Claire, you don't understand. Your sister is delicate. You're strong. You can handle this. Inti." She said it over and over, as if chanting a spell to keep me trapped. This time, I saved it all. But the most damning evidence came from the group chat leak. Screenshots of their conversation scrolled across my screen, black and white proof of the betrayal. There was no room for denial, no way to twist the words when they were laid bare. "Don't tell her until it's too late," my father had written. That sentence alone was enough to shatter whatever remained of my loyalty. And yet, in the middle of my cold detective work, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run colder. One of my cousins messaged me privately, confused. She said, "Claire, why did you call me last week, asking for money? You sounded desperate. You even mentioned your house." I froze. I hadn't called her. I asked her to send me a recording she had kept on her voicemail. When I pressed play, my own voice echoed back at me, or at least it sounded like mine. The tone was urgent, trembling, begging for a loan. But it wasn't me. The realization struck like lightning. My mother had used AI voice cloning. She had generated a version of my voice to beg relatives for money in my name. I sat there shaking, listening to my fabricated voice plead with words I never said. Betrayal wasn't enough to describe what I felt. It was theft of my identity, a violation so profound that I couldn't breathe. I clutched the phone, whispering to myself, "How could she?" My chest tightened with rage. If stealing my money wasn't enough, now they were stealing my very voice. But this horror became another weapon. I saved the voicemail, stored it in encrypted drives, and forwarded it to my lawyer. My evidence was no longer just about property or money. It was about fraud, about deception on a scale so vile that it would shake anyone who heard it. Still, evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed allies. I began to build a circle of trust outside my family. My first call was to a lawyer, a sharp woman who had seen cases like mine before. She didn't flinch when I explained the manipulation, the gaslighting, the financial theft. She simply said, "Keep everything, don't react. Let them think you're still compliant. We'll use their arrogance against them." Next came a real estate agent I had met through a friend. She agreed to help me explore discreet buyers for the country house, just in case I decided to act before my parents could. "Timing is everything," she reminded me. I took her words to heart. And then there was an old college friend, a hacker who once bragged about breaching his own school's server. I reached out hesitantly, explaining only what was necessary. He helped me recover deleted files from my parents' devices, uncovering proof that they had manipulated financial records. The pieces of their plan, once hidden, now glittered like broken glass under a spotlight. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I also found unexpected strength in strangers. Late at night, when sleep refused to come, I joined an online support group for people who had survived toxic families. Women shared their stories of betrayal, manipulation, and eventual escape. Reading their words was like looking into a mirror. Their courage gave me fuel. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. And most importantly, I wasn't alone. One afternoon, I sat across from my lawyer at a quiet cafe, a steaming cup of coffee warming my hands. For the first time in years, I felt safe. She leaned closer and said, "Claire, you have everything you need. Don't let them rush you. The right moment will come." Her confidence steadied me in a way I didn't expect. I looked out the window, watching people hurry by, each of them caught up in their own lives, unaware of mine unraveling and rebuilding at the same time. I took a deep breath. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't in years: control. The evidence was ready. The allies were in place. My family thought they had me cornered, but I was already turning their weapons back on them. And soon, the perfect opportunity to strike would arrive. An event where every mask would fall. and the truth would explode into the open. The baby shower was meant to be a celebration, but for me, it became a battlefield. When the invitation came, dripping with pastel colors and cheerful fonts, my first instinct was to decline. Why should I attend another event designed to praise my sister while I was erased? But then I realized this was it, the perfect moment. The room would be full of family, friends, neighbors. The stage was already set. All I needed was the courage to step into the light. I rented a small projector and tucked it into a discreet bag. My lawyer helped me prepare files, recordings of my mother's manipulative calls, screenshots of the group chat, even the AI-cloned voicemail where my own voice had begged for money I never asked for. Each piece of evidence was lined up like bullets in a chamber. My heart raced as I rehearsed what I would say, but still a nagging doubt gnawed at me. Was I about to go too far? Would exposing them publicly make me no better than them? On the day of the shower, I wore a simple dress, blending into the crowd as relatives greeted each other with hugs and laughter. My sister floated around the room like a queen, her belly round, her smile radiant. My parents hovered nearby, basking in the admiration of their guests. To everyone else, they were the picture of love and sacrifice. No one could see the rot beneath the surface. The music swelled, gifts piled high, and speeches began. I waited, my palms slick with sweat, the projector hidden under the tablecloth at my side. When my sister raised a glass to thank everyone, I knew it was time. I stood, my voice steady, though my knees trembled. "Before we celebrate," I said, "there's something everyone needs to hear." Confusion rippled through the crowd. I connected the projector to the screen meant for a slideshow of baby photos. Instead, the first recording played. "Claire, if you loved us, you'd help. Your sister is delicate. You're strong. You can handle this." My mother's voice echoed across the room. Gasps broke out. I pressed play again. This time, the group chat screenshots appeared, line after line of betrayal. "Don't tell her until it's too late. That house should be mine anyway." The audience shifted, murmurs spreading like wildfire. And then, the final blow, the AI-cloned voicemail. My voice, except it wasn't mine, begging for money. The room went silent. I looked around. My mother's face drained of color, her lips trembling. My sister clutched her stomach as though struck. My father slammed his fist against the table, the sound cracking through the silence. "This is a lie," he shouted. "She's twisting everything." But the damage was done. The truth was undeniable. My mother broke into tears, collapsing into her chair, while my sister wailed, "How could you ruin my day?" Guests stared, horrified, their image of my family shattered in minutes. Just when I thought the scene couldn't grow more chaotic, another figure stood from the back of the room. A tall man with graying hair and a steady gaze stepped forward. I recognized him instantly. The retired police chief my lawyer had quietly brought in as the official buyer of my country house. His voice carried authority as he spoke. "This property," he said, holding up the deed with my name on it, "belongs solely to Claire. I've already finalized the purchase with her. Any attempt to sell it without her consent is fraud." The room erupted again, but this time with disbelief at my parents. All their denials collapsed under the weight of his words. My father's bluster faded, his hands trembling. My mother buried her face in her hands. My sister stared at me with hatred, sharp enough to cut glass. The noise swirled around me. Accusations, whispers, sobs. For a moment, my chest tightened and my vision blurred. I thought I might faint under the weight of so many eyes. But then I felt a hand slip into mine. My best friend, who had quietly stood by my side throughout it all, squeezed gently. "Breathe," she whispered. "You're not alone." I drew in a shaky breath, my body trembling, but I didn't collapse. Instead, I stood taller. The power that had once been theirs to wield over me was gone. For years, I had been their silent victim. But in this moment, with every secret laid bare, the roles had shifted. As the crowd began to turn, whispering about the cruelty and deceit they had just witnessed, I knew the reckoning had only just begun. My family's reputation, once polished and proud, was cracking wide open. And their fall from grace was only getting started. In the days following the baby shower, the fallout spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered. Friends who once praised my parents crossed the street to avoid them. The story of what had happened, of the recordings, the group chat, the AI-cloned voicemail, spread through our community faster than I could have imagined. What had once been a family, revered for their unity, was now seen for what they truly were: manipulators, liars, and thieves. At first, my parents tried damage control. My mother posted cryptic messages online, playing the victim. "You never know the whole story," she wrote, accompanied by a photo of her tear-streaked face. My father ranted about family loyalty to anyone who would listen. But the evidence was too clear, the voices too undeniable. Every attempt to spin the narrative only dug their hole deeper. Then the law stepped in. My lawyer had already submitted the evidence: the financial trail of unexplained transfers, the group chat screenshots, and most damning of all, the AI voice cloning used to impersonate me. Detectives called me in for interviews, their questions sharp but respectful. They explained that using AI to commit fraud was a serious offense, and if proven, it could lead to charges against my mother. For the first time, I felt the weight shift off my shoulders. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Justice itself was entering the arena. But what I didn't expect was the avalanche that followed. Other relatives, cousins, an aunt, even a distant uncle, began contacting me privately. One by one, they confessed how they too had been manipulated over the years. My parents had borrowed money from them, promising repayment that never came. My sister had leaned on them for favors, guilt-tripping them the way she had done with me. They had stayed silent out of shame, out of fear of being the first to speak up. But now that I had exposed the truth, they found their courage. Suddenly, I wasn't the only victim. I was part of a growing chorus. Together, our voices painted a picture far uglier than I had realized. My parents' betrayal of me wasn't an isolated act. It was a pattern, a lifetime of exploitation disguised as family love. And now the pattern was unraveling in public view. I should have felt victorious. And in some ways, I did. Watching my parents lose the grip they had held for so long was satisfying. Hearing relatives speak truths they had buried for decades gave me strength. But beneath the triumph was something else, something heavier: grief. Because while justice was being served, my family was crumbling beyond repair. One evening, I sat alone in my country house, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the stillness. On the table before me was a photo of us from years ago. My parents smiling, my sister leaning on me, all of us pretending to be whole. My hand trembled as I picked it up. For the first time in weeks, the tears came freely. I wept not for what they had done, but for what could never be. The family I had longed for, the love I had begged for, it had never truly existed. I cried for the illusion I had clung to, and for the little girl inside me who had been told her needs mattered less. When the tears slowed, I felt something unexpected, relief. The grief was raw, but it was cleansing. It was as though I had been carrying a weight for decades, and now finally I had set it down. I realized then that justice wasn't just about punishing them. It was about freeing myself. In the weeks that followed, investigators continued their work, and my parents withdrew into silence. They no longer called. They no longer demanded. My sister sent one bitter message, "You ruined everything," and then disappeared into her own bitterness. The silence they left behind was sharp, but it was also peaceful. I began to notice the small joys again, the way the morning light poured through the windows of my house, the sound of birds outside, the warmth of a cup of coffee held between my palms. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next demand, the next guilt-ridden call. My life belonged to me. And yet, as I sat there with the photo in my hand, I whispered softly, "I wish it had been different." My voice cracked, but it didn't shatter me. I let the tears fall one last time, not as a prisoner of grief, but as someone finally letting go. The catharsis was complete. Justice had been served, but more importantly, I was free. What remained was a question. Could I rebuild from this wreckage? Could I find joy not defined by their absence, but by my own choices? From the ashes of betrayal, I would have to carve out a new life. And this time it would be one of my own making. The silence my family left behind was first strange, then liberating. For years I had been conditioned to expect the late-night calls, the demands, the guilt-soaked accusations. Now there was nothing but quiet. At first, the emptiness felt unsettling, like waiting for a storm that never came. But soon I began to understand. This was the space where I could rebuild. The first step was boundaries, real ones. I changed my phone number, blocked every account my parents and sister could use, and moved my finances into secure channels they couldn't touch. The locks on my country house were replaced, and eventually I sold it on my terms, not theirs, moving into a smaller home, closer to the city. It wasn't as picturesque, but it was mine, completely mine. Still, cutting them off didn't erase the years of conditioning. The guilt clung like smoke in my lungs. That's when I turned to therapy. At first, I resisted, telling myself I was strong enough to handle it alone. But strength had always been my prison, and I finally realized I needed help to truly be free. My therapist listened patiently as I poured out the story, from childhood lessons about sacrifice to the final showdown at the baby shower. For the first time, someone looked at me not as a daughter, a sister, or a provider, but as Claire. Just Claire. In one session, after I described the moment I cried over the old family photo, my therapist leaned in and said, "Your grief shows you how much you loved, but love doesn't mean surrender. You are allowed to keep yourself." Her words cracked something open in me. I laughed, an unexpected sound that startled both of us. It wasn't bitter or sharp, it was light. For the first time, I felt that I deserved happiness, not as a reward for sacrifice, but as a right. From there, my healing began to bloom. I learned to sit with my emotions instead of running from them, I practiced saying no without explanation, a word that once felt like a betrayal but now became a shield. I started investing in myself, new classes, new hobbies, new friendships. The walls I built weren't cages, they were fortresses that protected the life I was finally choosing. But healing didn't just stay private. One evening, restless, I opened my phone and recorded a short video. I spoke directly into the camera, telling my story, not the sanitized version, but the raw truth. How my family had manipulated me, how I had almost lost everything, and how I fought back. I didn't expect much, but overnight, the video went viral. Thousands of comments poured in, people sharing their own stories of toxic families, thanking me for saying what they had never dared to. That was how my second life began. I created a channel, posting regularly, not as a victim, but as a survivor who had found her voice. My followers grew, not just in numbers, but in connection. People wrote to me, "You helped me see I'm not crazy. You gave me courage." I realized my pain was becoming someone else's guidepost, and that gave every scar a purpose. Then came the message that changed everything. A woman wrote, "Claire, I was about to sign away my house to my brother. I saw your video and stopped. You saved me." I stared at the words, tears filling my eyes. For so long my family had taken my strength and used it against me. Now my strength was protecting others. One morning I stood by the window of my new home, sunlight streaming through clean glass. The air smelled of coffee and fresh beginnings. I thought back to the girl I had been, the one who cried in the dark, whispering that she only wanted to be loved. That girl was still part of me, but she no longer defined me. I wasn't begging for scraps of affection anymore. I was building something solid, radiant, mine. I stepped outside, letting the light hit my face. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat or a burden. It felt wide open. The wounds of betrayal would always leave marks, but they were no longer chains. They were reminders that I had survived, that I had chosen to rise. And as I looked ahead, I knew one thing with certainty. I didn't just survive, I thrived.